We'll go right now into a short video on Delia Taylor's garden. Delia and John live in Berkeley. You may know Delia. She was a staunch board member of the East Bay chapter of the California Native Plant Society for many, many years, and a longtime volunteer at the chapter's Native Here Nursery. As you'll see, she also has a beautiful garden. So let's go now and look at Delia Taylor's garden.
Hi, welcome to our garden. I'm Delia. It was exactly 40 years ago, in August 1980, that we saw the house that had the garden that became a native plant garden. My husband John is a mycologist and was hired at UC Berkeley as an assistant professor that year. Here he is with our grandson Rowan, who made him this painting for his 70th birthday. When we first arrived, John plunged himself into work and it was my job to find a house. My mom came to help. We drove around looking in areas where we might like to live. We saw an open house sign in Berkeley. It was a cute house, kind of Spanish style. We went in. I saw the price tag and turned around to leave. It was probably too expensive. But my mom went up the stairs. She looked out this window and she called out, "There's a creek here." And there really was a creek, and it had running water, and this was August. I was amazed. Both John and I are from Southern California, where natural running water is very special. We found out its name, Blackberry Creek. We bought the house because of the creek. This slide shows the garden now after a big restoration 9 years ago. The taller trees are California Bay and Coast Live Oak, and all are native to site. Both John and I have botany degrees, and we love native plants. So because of the trees, we decided that the garden should have mostly California natives. Sometime in the early 1980s, I saw a poster like this on Solano Avenue advertising a California native plant sale at Merritt College. It was one of the only places you could buy native plants in the East Bay. The sale was run by the local chapter of the California Native Plant Society. I joined at one of these sales and eventually became an active member. Here is one of the oldest plants from those sales on the left of the bridge. It's a ceanothus about 20 feet tall. It's called snow flurry. It's popular with the birds and the bees. Another plant from those sales is our silk tassel bush, called also very tall. It blooms in the winter and glows when the sun shines on it in the early morning. The flowers carry only pollen. It's the male plant. You'll be seeing the female too. We enjoy these two oldest plants very much and still have a few others from those sales. I've met many native plant enthusiasts through my involvement with the Native Plant Society. Happily, one of them is David Bigham, the landscape architect who designed the new garden. Here he is with Carlos Castellanos, the contractor. This photo was taken from the roof. David gave us a formal design for our mostly informal native plantings, as well as much-needed people places that we find much more comfortable than what we had in our old garden. We use the garden a lot more now. Another person I met is Kathy Kramer, who's bringing back the Natives Garden Tour has been going for years. This year there was a Zoom talk by Douglas Tallamy, an entomologist. We've all heard about the decline of insects and with that the decline in birds. It turns out that from the perspective of insects and birds, native plants are better and local native plants are best of all. The link to the talk is on this website. Local native plants have been grown for a couple of decades here at Native Here Nursery in Tilden Park. Most of our new plants came from here. This is a before photo of the two of the mounds. The walls and the benches were made from rocks and flagstone from our previous do-it-yourself attempts at landscaping. Mounds are good for natives because there is good drainage. 9 years later, in August, many plants are finishing their season and drying out. Those are sedges that look like dried grass. We like growing local natives because we get to know them throughout the seasons and can identify them along trails in their various states, from their leaves, their flowers, or fruits, even when they are going dormant. This is what the area looks like in springtime. The sedges are green. There's a lot going on. There are native grasses, white brodea, purple bluedix, yellow grandelia, buttercups and checkerbloom, Douglas iris in the back, golden aster with an emerging buckwheat in the center. The buckwheat takes over later in the year. A fieldcrest butterfly visiting the golden aster. Soaproot lilies, bluedix, and a carpenter bee. You'll be seeing more bee photos because I took a class about native bees. In early July, the buckwheat is coming into its own. The pink flowers are called Farewell to Spring. We have a bed with a few shooting stars and hound's-tongue that bloom in February. Both go dormant after blooming and start again when the rains come. This is typical for many herbaceous native plants. The same bed has California aster blooming in the summer. Back to August. In the pathways and people places, we have gravel instead of cement or flagstone. Gravel is a great place for annuals to germinate. In the center of the photo are some tall annuals. They are tarweeds, and they come up here every year. The flowers are small and open only in the early morning. Tarweeds are sticky and fragrant, probably to keep from being eaten. The Latin name for these tarweeds is Madia sativa. The seeds are very nutritious and were an important part of the diet of the Native Americans and are good food for birds and small animals. We see towhees, sparrows, and juncos searching for them in the gravel all through the winter. This is another annual tarweed, Madia elegans, with a native bee. This Madia also produces nutritious seeds, and both Madias make many seedlings. This is where editing comes in. Editing is essential in this kind of garden. One year I let the Madias grow in just a few places. This year I let them grow at the top of the stairs and down into the creek. When the seedlings are small, it's easy to remove them. I let this one grow under the table. The poppies would take over the yard, but this year they are allowed only below the steps. These white brodeas have done well in the gravel. Buckwheats also plant themselves around, and the bees love them. Yampa also seeds itself around. Yampa has a native bee. Going around the garden, we have mostly shrubs and trees that you would find in the East Bay. This is a pink flowering gooseberry blooming in the winter. It's bearing fruits in the summer. This is a wood rose. These are 9-bark flowers. It's a common shrub in Tilden. It loses its leaves in the fall. It's also in the rose family. We have blue elderberries and someone is eating them. It's too early for the hermit thrush. He comes in the fall, but there will be some berries left for him. Behind the bay we have hazelnuts and thimbleberries. That is not a tree in the center of the photo. It's a native grapevine that planted itself here. I tried to make it stay on the back fence, but instead it found its way to the top of the bay tree. We know it's fruiting because the grapes are knocked down. I was told that if you have a grapevine, you will have western bluebirds. And we have seen bluebirds along the street in the last few years. Maybe it's because of this vine. This is a young western bluebird in the neighborhood. Along the east side, we have the female silk tassel bush. It was pollinated by the wind from the male flowers. Those are her fruits. This is an anise swallowtail resting in the plants in January. This is Sonoma sage. I love the fragrance of the sages. California fuchsia in the fall. A view looking back at the house in March. A blue flowering ceanothus, lemonade berry, and the chestnut tree. There are hundreds of flowers in each inflorescence. Only a few develop into fruits. Birds, butterflies, and squirrels love the California chestnut tree, and we do too. The Douglas iris put on a show in April outside our kitchen window. This bed of annuals by the creek was started about 4 years ago. They make a great display in the spring. Our family is into bee watching too. I think this is a leaf cutter bee. She stores the pollen under her belly, not on her legs. Alas, this is what happens to annuals. I collect the dry vegetation in paper bags. The seeds fall to the bottom for sharing, and there are many left in the ground for the birds and next year's crop. This is a view looking up the creek. The property line is filled in by a large hazelnut and the chestnut tree. This is the sunny side of the creek. Some of our neighbors don't want any plants in their creek, but of course we do. This is a torrent sedge and monkey flowers. This is a stream orchid from Watershed Nursery. The plants in the creek die back completely in winter, so they get no damage from rushing water. There is a moist bank that has cardinals, monkey flowers all summer, and verbena. Looking down the creek, we can see some of our neighbor's yard. We have a creek dogwood there and black twinberry. The black twinberry has flowers from spring to fall. This is a common plant around Jewel Lake in Tilden Park. Hummingbirds come to it. There is snowberry here and in other parts of the garden. There's a good fishing spot here too. The ferns planted themselves from spores. Everyone asks what happens when it rains. The water never gets much higher than this. After the water dies down, it's a good time to look in the creek. This time I found a basketball. The sedges and rushes on the bank stay green. They get washed but not washed away. We are so happy to have places for people. This is a party of mycologists here in Berkeley for meetings. We'd love to welcome you too to visit the garden. Thank you.
Delia wasn't able to be with us today. She pre-recorded this presentation. She has a lovely garden in Berkeley, near kind of near the Zachary's Pizza, just to place it. I've been seeing this garden for probably 20 years or so now, since before they renovated it and with this new design. And it is just one of my favorite gardens. It's beautiful and so interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us.